A few months ago, I went over a handful of Nintendo games I believe to be nearly perfect, and today I'm covering some more that deserve the same treatment. Nintendo spent over 20 years iterating on Super Smash Bros., and with Ultimate, it felt like it finally came all together. The roster spans decades, genres, and companies. Characters that have no business sharing a select screen somehow coexist without the whole thing feeling like a mess. Sakurai went into this project wanting to bring every single fighter back and then some, and he actually pulled it off. We're talking around 90 different fighters here, but here's what makes it work perfectly. Pick up any character for the first time, and within seconds you immediately understand their weight, their speed, their entire moveset. Every character feels different here, except for the echoes. Movement runs faster and more responsive than Smash 4, but it sidesteps the execution barriers that made Melee such a technical game, while still being fairly technical itself. The skill ceiling is still absurdly high, but the skill floor sits way closer to where most people actually play. You don't need to memorize frame data or study matchup charts to have a good time, though all that depth is there if you want to dig into it. Pulling off this balance in a fighting game is brutally difficult, and even more difficult when you consider the sheer size of the roster, and yet Ultimate does it perfectly. I still love Melee, and I get why people prefer it, but Ultimate strikes a much better balance for what the series actually is. Something really impressive to me is how the roster avoids collapsing under its own weight. Nintendo preserves what makes each character unique instead of sanding down the edges for balance. Every fighter stays faithful to their source material. Remember in Smash Melee when Ganondorf was basically just Captain Falcon? Completely different characters don't have anything like that here. Then there's also the stage design here, and I mean there's so many different ones here, and you can play them in Omega or Battlefield form as well. For more competitive players like myself, I'm not going to be playing in too many of the wild stages, but I do appreciate them being here. Ultimate's flexibility is a huge part of why it works. You can strip it down to tournament legal stages and no items, you can turn on stamina mode with spirits and stage hazards and custom modifiers. Comp players get a great experience here, and casual players can have a great time here as well. Neither approach feels like you're fighting against what the game wants to be. Something like Melee is a far more technical game like I mentioned, but then Brawl is way too casual. Smash 4 was an improvement on that, but I feel like Ultimate is the true realization of what the series could be. Now, like with any game, it's not 100% perfect. Online play has noticeable input delay, and matchmaking that can be a coin flip. Balance patches sometimes took longer than the community wanted. World of Light is ambitious but drags in spots with encounters that start blurring together. But none of this touches what you're actually here for, the core act of just playing Super Smash Bros. Nintendo just wanted to make a Smash game that could represent the entire series without compromise, and they did it. The 1,000-Year Door is just fun. It sounds reductive, but it's the truth. This game commits to being enjoyable from the first hour and just never lets up. Everything points in the same direction: the presentation, the combat, the progression, the writing. It all reinforces what the game is trying to be. Battles aren't here to drain your resources or slow you down like the most recent 3 games in the series. They exist to actually be played. Timed inputs keep you engaged, enemy formations actually matter, stage hazards mess with your safe patterns. The audience reacts to how well you're performing, not just whether you win. I recently played the remake on Switch, and the game is as great as ever. With the more recent Paper Mario games, every time I play them I just try to avoid enemies, but here I was actively engaging in it, and by the end of the game I was probably a little too strong. But that's on me, not on the game. The badge system is where this really becomes your experience instead of just the games. Rather than shoving you down a fixed upgrade path, it hands you control over how Mario actually functions. You decide what matters to you: damage output, health, FP efficiency, high risk setups that pay off when you nail the timing. These choices change how fights play out, not just how long they take. A tough encounter might need better planning, or you completely rethinking your entire loadout. The game never says this is the right way to do it. It just gives you the tools to pretty much do whatever you want without feeling too complicated either. Partners make this even better instead of just being there for the ride. Each one changes how encounters flow in specific ways. Koops can pull items forward, Vivian can make you temporarily disappear, Bobbery can damage certain walls, and then of course in combat you can actually upgrade them. And besides just having so much more life here than the previous game, they're far more interesting in combat. And then the writing here. While the story isn't the best in the series because of Super Paper Mario, the environments here and the vibes are immaculate. Brogueport has rough edges, NPCs will lie to you, complain about their lives, and try to steal from you. Chapters shift tone and structure constantly. One minute you're solving mystery on a train, then later you're just straight up on the moon. There's a chapter where you compete in wrestling matches. Like, there's just so many ideas here, and it seems like every single one lands. And remember, I'm talking specifically about the Switch version of this game, because in the original there was the General White sequence, which was a pretty big flaw in my opinion, but since that's been pretty much ironed out, there's really not many issues in this game. And I'm saying this as someone whose favorite Paper Mario game is Super Paper Mario. I think the 1,000-Year Door is an objectively better game. Just everything here hits. The combat, the humor, the level design, the pacing. Nintendo just doesn't make games like this often. often, not because they can't, but because they rarely let this much experimentation happen in a major franchise. There's a reason this game is still talked about 20 plus years later, because it's just a masterpiece of game design. It proves that an RPG doesn't need to be super complicated either, because while you do have customization here, it is something that kids can pick up and play as well as adults. Before I get to the next game, I just want to clarify some things. So these are not flawless games, because nothing is. I'm talking about games that basically nailed what they set out to do, where the problems don't outweigh the design. If you disagree, that's fine, just drop your picks in the comments, because I already know I'm missing someone's how did you not include it favorite. I also wanted this to be more analytical, really going more in depth into mechanics and talking about what works and why. Some of these games aren't even my favorites, but I just felt from an objective game design level, there were just very few flaws. So what I just said, that doesn't apply here because I love Animal Crossing New Leaf. It's just one of the most relaxing games I've ever played, and it holds a very special place in my heart. Instead of chasing constant engagement, it doesn't bury you under objectives or pressure you to optimize every second. Instead, it creates a space and hands you authority over it and lets time do the rest. You're not some visitor passing through someone else's town, but you're the mayor here, and that comes with responsibility but never pressure. Projects take actual days to complete, changes settle in gradually instead of immediately reshaping everything. It makes short progress feel earned rather than automated, and stops the town from ever feeling disposable or temporary. Town development centers on commitment. When you decide where to put a bridge, a cafe, a public works project, you're stuck with that choice. You start planning, you walk around the space before committing, you think about how paths flow, how villagers move around, how different areas feel at different times of the day. Daily play here also hits a careful balance. It's always something you can do, but it really piles up to where it feels like obligation. Shops rotate their stacks, fossils respawn, villagers ask for help with small tasks. None of it stacks into some checklist you need to complete. Conversations do repeat eventually, but personality sticks around longer than even in the next entry. Villagers follow routines, they remember when you help them out. I remember when I used to play this, and there were certain villagers I wanted to keep, so I always talked them, I always tried to help them out, and it just made the work here feel more meaningful. Customization here grows bit by bit. Home design lets you express yourself, but there are limitations you have to think about. You don't unlock everything immediately, you build towards it over time. Main Street expands organically as your town matures, adding new services and shops that reflect the time you've invested rather than some task list you've checked off. Ordinances give you subtle control over pacing, letting you adjust schedules and villager behavior without fundamentally changing what the experience is. Now the limitations are obvious here. You can't freely move buildings around, the terrain stays fixed. Some people see this as restrictive and might prefer New Horizons due to having more customization, but I feel like those constraints actually define what makes your experience special. It makes you feel like you're just a regular person, and not a greater being that can just terraform the land. New Leaf builds attachment through this consistency, and even beyond things that can be measured, there's just a vibe about this game that I like. A lot of things I mentioned here are in other Animal Crossing games, but I feel like all of them have a fatal flaw. The original was limited, as was the first game in the series and still testing ideas. Wild World lacked holidays, and was also light on content being a DS game, and New Horizons has weaker villagers, and doesn't have something like Main Street in New Leaf. That just feels like something's missing, but New Leaf just feels like the perfect Animal Crossing game. Sure, you might be able to make nitpicks here and there, but I don't think there's any major flaws in this game. Super Mario Bros. 3 works because it wastes absolutely nothing. Every screen, every enemy, every rule exists for a specific reason, and once it served its purpose, the game moves on. There's no padding here, there's no filler, everything here is deliberate, and that's why even decades later, this game still holds up. It's actually extremely impressive because if you look at most other NES games, a lot of them have aged pretty poorly, but Super Mario Bros. 3 is still as great as ever. The overworld map immediately signals that this isn't as straightforward as previous games, because instead of just going level to level, like you could do some item management, go to the Toad houses, you try to find some secrets along the way, and that all happens outside of the actual platforming. And then going back to the power-ups, this is where Nintendo really got creative. The Tanuki suit gives you control over vertical movement and recovery, the Hammer suit pushes you towards aggressive play, the P-Wing lets skilled players skip entire sections if they know where to use it. None of these are required to beat the game, and new players can safely ignore them and still make it through, but experienced players can completely break things open. Level design stays focused from beginning to end. Short stages don't feel half-baked because they're not trying to do too much. Each one introduces an idea, explores it, and then changes things up. Fortresses test your awareness and timing. Airship stages definitely change the pacing, but in a very good way. This basically took what the original Super Mario Bros. Did, and then completely expanded on it. It looks better, it feels better, it has so much more variety. And that's not to say that this game is 100% perfect, like I've said multiple times in this video, because there are some elements that show their age. The physics definitely feel stiffer than later entries. Certain worlds lean heavily on similar gimmicks, but these limitations never interrupt the flow because the game always keeps moving forward. The game simply does exactly what it set out to do. And then moving on from Super Mario Bros. 3 is Super Mario Worlds. So being transparent, this is my favorite 2D platformer of all time, but that's also for a very good reason, and I'm sure a lot of you agree. Nothing here feels rushed. Nothing feels like it's compensating for something that's missing. The movement here is the first thing you notice. Mario accelerates smoothly, jumps have a clearer arc and hang time, momentum carries better here. Super Mario Bros. 3 controlled perfectly fine, but it just feels even better in Super Mario World. New abilities expand your options without cluttering things up. Spin jumps just add another layer here. Yoshi, who's the big addition, adds so much here, gives you an extra jump, lets you eat enemies, and also he's just Yoshi. Like, come on, how can you not be a fan of him? Then there's the cape flight here, which actually can separate casual play from true mastery of this game. Unlike Super Mario Bros. 3 with the Tanuki suit, which was extremely easy to use, the cape is a little more complicated, but if you learn how it actually works, whole sections open up. You can skip hazards and bypass challenges entirely. Like with the previous game, you can skip entire sections if you know what you're doing. And then the overworld here, which is one of the most crucial parts of the whole experience. It's more like a puzzle here with a lot of hidden exits branching off into new paths. And Star Road gives a lot more incentive to really see everything this game offers. The game never tells you where the secrets are hiding, it just wants you to notice patterns and remember some odd details. When you find something here, it feels a lot more earned here than, say, the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Level design here stays consistent without getting repetitive. Early stages teach fundamentals clearly, and mid-game levels start layering ideas without overwhelming you. Then this game can actually get pretty difficult in the late game, and I feel like the pacing of going from easy levels to gradually getting more difficult was done flawlessly here. Now there are some shortcomings here. Boss fights are pretty simple compared to what came later. Some areas packed with secrets feel underused once you discover them. These are more structural choices than actual design failures. The core experience holds together from start to finish, and there's a reason why everyone still loves this game and considers it an all-time great so many years later. The world here isn't massive just to impress you, but it's massive to make you feel where you actually are. You're literally moving across giant bodies, and the game never lets you forget that. Landmarks stay visible long before you reach them, paths curve vertically and horizontally in ways that reinforces your position rather than confusing you, and you always understand where you are. Combat splits people early on because the game refuses to hold your hand up front. Xenoblade expects you to learn by doing. Cooldowns, positions, bonuses, aggro management, and party coordination, all of it takes time to click. Early fights can feel chaotic because you don't yet understand how your tools interact with each other. Once that understanding snaps into place, battles completely shift tone. They become more controlled and have more of a rhythm to them. The vision mechanics here force you to adapt instead of just repeating the same rotation. Party dynamics actually matter here too. Each character fills a role that affects how fights unfold, not just what the damage numbers look like. Team composition changes pacing. Synergy between characters matter. You're constantly making decisions about positioning, timing, target priority. Again, the game rarely stops to tell you what to do, but just assumes you're paying attention. So it feels very earned once you actually understand what went right. Then the story here just adds on to all this. The characters have clear motivation, and the stakes build gradually here. The Monado here, while part of a plot device, is a lot more. Shapes the progression, combat options, and the entire pacing of the game. And then major reveals also change earlier moments instead of replacing them. I think it's impressive that this was also a Wii game, and while we've got 2 remasters of it, I wonder how much this game really could have done if released on the Wii U or even Switch. While we obviously have had Xenoblade Chronicles games released on those systems, they're still very different experiences, and some of you may think that Xenoblade 2 or Xenoblade 3 could be a perfect game, and I totally understand that. I'm not the biggest fan of the series, so if you disagree with what I'm saying here, let me know why you think those games should be on here over the original. Because there are issues in this game that are due to the game's age. The menus can feel busy and overwhelming, and of course there are performance issues, but I don't think any of that breaks the game. So this is one I wasn't sure if I wanted to include. I love Metroid Dread, but is it a nearly perfect game? Well, let's talk about it. From the opening moments, the game makes it clear that Samus is powerful, fast, and extremely capable, but she's never fully in control of the situation. The movement here is by far the best we've ever got in a 2D Metroid game. Actions chain together cleanly, slide cancels momentum without hesitation, wall jumps actually register here when you want them to, and as someone who played Super Metroid, you don't realize how big of a plus that is here. I actually did include Super Metroid in the previous video in the series if you want to check that out, but one of the only flaws I could think of it was the controls do work against you sometimes. My recommendation is, if you're getting into the Metroid series, is do not start with Dread, just because it's hard to go back to the other games when the movement is just so much better here. Moving on from the actual movement, the world structure pushes you forward without feeling manipulative. Paths close behind you, and the game rarely traps you arbitrarily just to force you somewhere. Shortcuts open as a natural result of your progression. Backtracking of course exists here, being a Metroidvania, but it feels a lot more measured and serves a purpose. You're being guided, not dragged. The map constantly narrows your focus while still leaving room for curiosity when appropriate. When the game opens up exploration, it's intentional, and when it restricts you, the restriction serves pacing rather than just trying to take control like something like Metroid Fusion, which I still do love. Then we gotta talk about the Emmy zones, which are a little controversial. These sections remove all comfort. You can't overpower these things at first, and you can't methodically clear them like normal enemies. If one gets you in its sights, all you can do is run. Whenever you're in one of these zones, the threat feels constant because the rules are strict and unforgiving. If you get caught, you have a split-second button press you can do to get out of it, and once you get the tools to fight back, it's extremely satisfying to take down one of the Emmys. Boss fights here are also very well designed, even though I think there's a couple that aren't the best. The patterns are very readable here if you're paying attention, and damage is punishing enough to matter. Like, this is not an easy game, even though it's not the most difficult either. You're expected to learn quickly. Death is going to come fast in some of these boss battles, but the restarts are instant, and each attempt teaches you something specific about timing, spacing, whatever it may be. By the later stages, as you get stronger, Samus can feel unstoppable. Then the final boss, who I'm not going to spoil, is a huge difficulty spike. Being a Metroid game, of course, the storytelling is going to stay minimal here. Character development comes through playing the game, but there are key moments in this story that actually are pretty interesting if you're into Metroid lore. Now, there are frustrations here. This is a different game than Super Metroid, which I consider to be nearly perfect for different reasons. A lot of people don't like the constant forward push. I personally do, and a few abilities here don't see much use. The map here is also incredibly designed and well connected, and I just don't understand how people can make games like this. Now going back to why I really had to think about if I wanted to include this, because a lot of people won't see this as a perfect game. Some people hate the Emmy sections, some people hate the structure of it, but some people will hate anything that's popular enough. I think from an objective design standpoint, you could look at this as being a game with very little flaws. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe here is actually not my favorite Mario Kart game. If you want to see which one is, check out my Mario Kart ranking, but I think objectively, it set out to do exactly what it wanted to do. After decades of refining this formula, Nintendo finally hit a point where just every single system supports forward motion. Driving feels exact and responsive here, acceleration, drifting, boosting, recovery, all of it behaves consistently across different characters and vehicle setups. You know how your kart will respond before it actually happens, and the predictability doesn't make races boring, but makes them fair. When you make a mistake, you usually understand why, and the mechanics here feel really good too. Track design is legitimately the strongest the series has ever produced, and specifically talking about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the DLC, there's an insane amount of courses here, and pretty much all of them flow naturally, and have visual cues that communicate the speed and risk, and also just look great. Anti-gravity sections widen the track space, and actually make you want to collide with other racers. Classic tracks benefit just as much as new ones, and often feel cleaner and more readable than their original versions. Items stay chaotic here, but the chaos feels more controlled and purposeful. Comebacks are possible without feeling guaranteed or cheap, like in Mario Kart World, for example. Players in the lead still have real agency here, which again, Mario Kart World severely lacks. The balance between luck and actual execution is carefully managed here, and might be the best the series has ever handled it. The deluxe version itself is a huge part of what keeps this game going. There's a reason this game has sold almost 70 million copies, being a port of a Wii U game. It's just the original fantastic game, but with a battle mode that's fully realized instead of being a tacked on afterthought. Online play is stable, matchmaking happens fast, and this is the most content we've ever had in a Mario Kart game, besides arguably Mario Kart World, and even that has far fewer tracks, but it has the open world, so take that as you will. Now, this isn't to say that this is objectively the Mario Kart game you should have the most fun with, because you might like mechanics in other games better, but just looking at it from a game design angle, what is this game doing wrong exactly? Because I can't really think of anything. Now here's a few games I want to talk about a little more briefly. Kirby Superstar Ultra is widely considered to be the greatest Kirby game. It offers multiple modes that build off consistent core mechanics, with the copy abilities that feel great here, and each ability has multiple input and situational uses. You can button mash through, or actually try to really master it. The Marin modes strengthen pacing rather than disrupting it. Short campaigns introduce different focuses, with Revenge of Meta Knight emphasizes speed, Great Cave Offensive shifts to exploration, Milky Way Wishes reframe ability progression, and then the arena pulls everything together. Co-op drops in seemingly without overwhelming the screen. Difficulty scales naturally based on engagement, and the game accommodates wildly different skill levels simultaneously, which is something the Kirby series hasn't always done, as these games are usually a little too easy. Difficulty spikes are mild and some modes are brief, but none of this actually undermines the experience. Kirby Superstar Ultra knows what it offers. It's just a flexible, consistent platformer that adapts to you. Nintendo has made more technically impressive Kirby games since, but this just feels like they did exactly what they set out to do. Donkey Kong Country 2 took what made the original great and just sharpened everything. Movement is tighter, and the timing matters more, and levels just expect more from you. This is a difficult game. When you succeed, it feels earned. That's all I'll say for that. Level structure defines the entire game, and each stage commits completely to one specific idea. There's the bramble levels, minecarts, vertical climbs. The concepts are isolated and explored thoroughly here. Character differences matter here. Dixie's hover changes jump approach and risk management. Diddy's speed alters momentum and timing. Then there's the animal buddies here, which are fan favorites, and they expand even more options. There's also so many secrets here. If you really observe the game, you can find them, but it feels earned, whether you want to find the bonus challenges or just all the collectibles. Also, the soundtrack here, I could have talked about this for other games. Pretty much all of these have fantastic soundtrack, but this is a David Wise game, so you already know how good it is. You might have your patience tested here, and bonus barrel placements occasionally are irritating, but those are brief in what is a fantastic game. And just a quick side note, I know a lot of people wanted me to include Donkey Kong Bonanza. While I personally actually enjoyed that game more, I think there are bigger issues in it that keep it off this list. Lastly, I wanted to give a very brief mention to Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. This is one I wasn't really sure if I wanted to include, but I will say that the pacing is tighter than most Pokemon games, and the Pokemon World Tournament is one of the series' strongest additions. The story here is one of the better in the series, and everything here just feels great. Now, I'm not the biggest Pokemon fan, so I don't want to say that this is nearly perfect, but let me know in the comments if you think that it deserves a place in this list. And that's the video. Once again, not all of you are going to agree. I'm sure there's going to be games you wanted on here that aren't here, and games on here that you feel are awful. There's going to be people saying, whatever games included, list invalidated, and there's no way to avoid that. As the old saying goes, you can never make everyone happy. I just made this list to go over some games I felt were nearly perfect, and if you haven't yet, be sure to check out my original video. It is one of my earlier videos on the channel, so the mic quality isn't as good, and I'm unsure about a couple of the picks I made in it, but if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy that too. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't and join my Discord. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.